Okay, so Los Angeles Chargers draft edition. I thought they had a good draft, and we'll start things off with their first pick, Rashawn Slater in round one. I think a lot of people thought he might end up going earlier. I saw a lot of mock drafts saying he was going to go number 8. So I like him a lot. I think pretty much everyone agrees he's a really good player. Some people have Darisaw ahead of Slater. One of those people is me, but that's not a slight on Slater. I think Slater is really good. Could be a really good run blocker, has good lateral movement. Kind of the one maybe slight concern you have is that typically guys who sort of rely more on their athleticism are guys that tend to turn into bust more often than guys who rely on just like their arm length and strength. But his arm length and strength is still fine. So he'll probably be very good. I'm totally in favor of this pick at 13. I have no issues with it. And I think that, again, they needed to help the offensive line. So that's really why I like it. And then for round 2, another guy I was a little bit lower on than most, but there's a reason for it. With Asante Samuel, I was kind of a little bit lower on him than most because I felt like he's kind of stuck in the zone corner type guy, much like his dad, where I'm not sure exactly how much I would trust him being a man coverage corner type guy. I like him as a guy who, he didn't run the fastest 40 when you factor in that was his pro day time, which are notoriously quicker than what they actually run. So that's a bit concerning, but you can sort of let him play off a little bit, let him come in and make a play, make a quick tackle, things like that, which is what I like about him. So yeah, the height's not great, but I don't really care about that. I mean, he can play. If you can play, you can play. And it's really just the speed that was my only concern. But you look at his, you put him in a position where he can kind of play 8 yards off every play. He's not going to get burned deep. And he can now sort of use his good feet to break, come in, make a play. I'm a big fan of this as well because of the system, because I think the Chargers with Staley, they need a corner, and he's someone who should be able to really help them out in that system. I'm a big fan of this selection as well. Then in the third round, the Chargers got a guy who I don't think a ton of people had going right here in the third round in Josh Palmer. But, he's a wide receiver who isn't necessarily the fastest. He's not necessarily the biggest, although he is pretty big at 6'1". So, above average size for a wide receiver. But it's more about the position itself. They needed a receiver, I think, because they have Mike Williams, they have Keenan Allen. They kind of wanted to get a third receiver. So it seems like it's maybe not necessarily the receiver I would have taken there. I think there were a couple better receivers still on the board. But at the end of the day, if they like this guy and think he'll fit their scheme better, then go ahead, take him. And it's a position of need, so I'm all for it. And then in the third, they go with Trey McKitty, who I like this pick. I like this pick a lot. I think getting him into the third round where he's a tight end, a big tight end at 6'5", 245. And it's kind of a guy that I think the goal is probably Jared Cook can sort of be the sort of 1 year stopgap where you have him in there and then you have McKitty kind of learn, get a little bit better, and then by his second year he can really thrive, which we talk about a lot. Tight ends tend to take a year to develop. They tend to not do great their rookie year. So getting a tight end here, you're not really concerned about. Obviously they want to be competitive this year, but I think the Chargers realize it's a process. They're hoping for the best this year, but it's very likely that it could be a couple years away. So getting a guy who could be good for the future, like this pick a lot, I think it makes a lot of sense. They then drafted Chris Rumpf, who I'm very interested in him actually, because, again, obviously they have Joey Bosa, so him by himself can get pressure on the quarterback. But I think that he's someone who he's only 6'2", so you kind of look at that and say, okay, not the tallest, 244, so not small, but just, a little bit smaller than some of these other edge rushers. But he has pretty good arm length at 33 3/4 inches. So it's better than maybe you would expect from his height. And that's interesting to me, as you can potentially be the first guy to create contact. And that does translate well to the NFL. So again, it's a guy who has some traits you like. And the hope is that you can sort of figure out the traits you don't like, get those out of him, and sort of put him in a position to succeed. Again, this feels like a good selection. I haven't watched a ton of tape on Rumpf, but it feels like a good selection here with round 4. Then in round 5, they go tackle with Brendan James, which makes sense to me, just given, around this point, you're kind of going after depth pieces. Well, go get a position where, listen, you have Brian Bulaga, who has trouble staying on the field. So getting a guy who can play tackle and can kind of be a depth guy makes a lot of sense. You can never have too much offensive linemen. So in favor of this pick as well, for sure. So then with their final 3 picks, there's Nick Niemann, and I'm going to skip their other 6th-round pick for a second and talk about Mark Webb, just because those two guys, to me, seemingly are just guys where you need more guys in the room when it comes to positions of weakness. They could use linebackers, they could use defensive backs. And again, Staley's got a whole new defense, so maybe getting guys who can kind of fit that defense and at least just be depth guys, getting more people in the room, that's important. So I like that. And it seems like Webb will also be a special teams guy. So that's nice to see. And then for Larry Roundtree, a running back out of Missouri, he's interesting as well because let's be honest, running backs late in the draft actually tend to have pretty good value. They might not have value for forever, but they have some value. And I wouldn't be shocked at all if he gets playing time. And again, a lot of running backs tend to be good on special teams as well. So I could see that being a factor. So, again, they're kind of shoring up that depth a little bit that I think they desperately needed. Their depth does look like kind of an issue pre-draft. They fixed that. They fixed the offensive line. They've, added a wide receiver that could potentially start, and Asante Samuel, a corner that could essentially start in a position of weakness. So I'm a big fan of what a lot of the Chargers did. They got better, and they seemingly could be, I think they're closer to winning a Super Bowl now than they were a week ago, which is the goal at the end of the draft. So that's what I think. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from you. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.